Welcome to the latest Motley Fool scoreboard. I'm on Chocoballoon. We've got longtime fools Tyler Crow and Nick Seipel giving a 1 to 10 rating to Sephora's arch enemy, Ulta Beauty, ticker symbol ULTA. Rate the strength of Ulta's business first, including factors like industry and competition. A 10 is invincible, a 1 is hopeless. Tyler's at a 7. Nick, you're at an 8.
I rated Ulta an 8 because it's the clear leader in beauty retail in the United States, has over 1,400 stores across all 50 U.S. states. The company controls about 9% of the beauty market in the U.S., and nearly 2/3 of Gen Z women are members of its loyalty program. It is the dominant player in its category.
Yeah, I said 7. I mean, and what a better panel to talk about beauty retail than these three fellas right here, right? So let's really dig into this one. So beauty retail, the category, is a relatively resilient business. Even there's an economic theory based on it called the lipstick effect. If you haven't read it, it's pretty interesting. That said, it's still subject to the changing tastes that leaves most of these companies vulnerable over the very long term. Well, I don't have a lot of hard evidence to support this thesis I'm going to say right here, but I think we can all agree there's been some seismic shifts in consumer tastes over the recent years across multiple categories, whether it be apparel, beverages, beauty products, and while Ulta is doing spectacularly well right now and will likely have a decent runway for a long time, watching companies that were like the stalwart brands of our younger years, Nike, Boston Beer, Foot Locker, The Gap, things like that, it's a reminder that retail is a brutal industry that rarely have these like multiple generations of staying power and kind of makes those like buy and hold forever businesses practically impossible in this industry.
I'm not mean like Tyler. I'm not going to make you look up lipstick effect. That's when times are tough. People try to get some small luxuries like a nice lipstick and can kind of stabilize things a bit. Let's talk management. A 10 is Warren Buffett. A 1 is Homer Simpson. Both of you have 6s, Nick.
Yeah, really not a lot to go off here. The new CEO took her role at the start of 2025. Not a lot to judge off of. That said, she's been with the company since 2014, served as CEO starting in 2021, has been part of Ulta, again, becoming the dominant player in its category. So I'd rated her above average, but not enough information to go much higher than that.
6 as well. My largest concern is actually with kind of a less than ideal compensation structure for management. If you go in compensation packages, there's not really anything to like guardrail against per share value, and there's no real incentives for capital efficiency across this bill for this business, which it doesn't necessarily mean it's absolutely bad, but it opens the door for things like M&A deals that pad paychecks but don't necessarily add value for investors. And a business that starts to slow down in its growth might be tempted to do things like M&A that may not necessarily be value accretive for investors.
We are our incentives. For financials, a 10 is a fortress. A 1 is yikes. Tyler's at a 7. Nick, you're at an 8.
Yeah, I went 8. Ulta's got really strong returns on capital, over 20%, about $1 billion in annual free cash flow, no debt on the balance sheet, again, excluding finance leases, being the dominant player in its industry, really strong financial profile. This is a stalwart business.
Yeah, I went 1 less. Always to be the one to cast aspersions on these shows, but I will point out that revenue growth has started to decelerate, and I wouldn't say stall out, but pretty close. 8 straight quarters of less than 10% year-over-year revenue growth is like its longest period without a double-digit gain. And I would have thought that the pandemic pull forward would have kind of abated by now. You saw during like 2021, 2022. 30-40% growth, and then gone to this single digit kind of period, but the stall growth and slight margin deterioration starting in fiscal year 2022, they're at least worth keeping an eye on, and for me, enough to kind of knock it down 1 point compared to Nick.
Tyler, let's move on to valuation. I'm interested to see what you say. How well will Ulta stock do over the next 5 years? How safe is it? 10's a sure thing, 1's a lottery ticket.
I went 5 to 10 because, you won't let me do like 7 to 12 or something like that. So we'll go 5 to 10 with a safety score of 8. I think the nice thing here is that we're not talking about a stock. We're not talking about absurd valuation. This company right now is trading at 18 times earnings. At that kind of a valuation, we don't have to really like pray to the market gods that we keep a market premium. So even if there is a slowdown in sales, we're not as likely to suffer from like a valuation contraction over this 5-year window. And, there's still modest growth. And something along those lines, I think typically should get about a 7 to 12% annualized return. But I'll just play it safe and say 5 to 10.
Yeah, I did the same 5 to 10% return with a slightly higher safety score of 9. Ulta is essentially a royalty on beauty sales in the U.S. And while we had really above normal growth during the pandemic period, that's trending back to its historical low to mid single digit growth pattern. That said, if you look out a little bit longer term, longer than this 5-year time frame, Ulta is at 1,400 stores in the U.S. today, thinks it will top out at 1,800 stores. We're looking at, as we get 5+ years out, unless Ulta expands internationally, maybe could hit its ceiling on store growth sometime toward the end of our 5-year forecast period. Maybe that puts a ceiling on multiple expansion and that sort of thing.
Time for everyone's favorite topic. Tyler, is there a company in Ulta's space that you like better?
Because we need more beauty recommendations from us. Unfortunately, Fragonard is family owned, so I can't say that one. So I'm going to go with Interparfums, ticker's IPAR on the U.S. exchange, but it has a European subsidiary, trades on the Paris market under IPT. I actually think the European one's the better investment. Interparfums is a fragrance and beauty product manufacturer that does like white label deals with fashion brands. So like when Coach or Donna Karan wants to do a fragrance, they hire Interparfums to design, manufacture, market, and distribute it. Then Interparfum pays a royalty to the fashion brand on the volume of that fragrance sold. The nice thing about this business is that it isn't necessarily tied to any single fashion brand. So when the next great fashion house or trend comes along and needs a fragrance, Interparfums can step in and perhaps replace some of the older, more stale deals that it's going. Donna Karan was one of its biggest ones recently, and it just signed one with Lacoste. So kind of an interesting play in the fragrance space.
Yeah, when it comes to beauty retailers, I think Ulta is the best company by far. That said, Tyler said something off the top of the show about this is a category where consumer preferences can evolve over time. And so if I'm looking at the broader beauty ecosystem, one company that I think is worth having on your radar is Evolus, ticker EOLS. Evolus calls itself a performance beauty company, specializes in injectable products like fillers, and also has a competitor with Botox in the neurotoxin market called Jeuveau. However, unlike AbbVie, which it competes with in the neurotoxin market, the parent company of Botox, Evolus is an exclusively cash pay aesthetic only company, gives it a lot more flexibility than its competitors when it comes to pricing and when it comes to how it markets its product, which has allowed Jeuveau to go from 0 to double-digit market share in the U.S. over just a few years. As the company expands, I think its differentiated market's going to allow it to take share. And over time, I think these injectables are going to become just seen as standard products in the beauty category. I'm not the only one who thinks that. L'Oreal, big beauty company, took a 10% stake in another injectable competitor, Galderma, last year. Over time, I think that this is a product that evolves from something that's seen as a pharmaceutical treatment to something that is just seen as part of someone's beauty regimen.
Y'all went pretty deep tracks. I was surprised that the owner of Sephora didn't make this top it, but it did make the Boston Beer top it. So go back and watch that one if you want the answer to that. Thanks to Tyler Crow and to Nick Seipel. They've given Ulta a decent overall score of 6.9 out of 10. Look out for a new scoreboard every market day at 7 p.m. Eastern. Next up is Wayfair. Till then, Fool on.